For centuries, the name Samael has been whispered with fear and condemnation. But what if his true story is far more complex, stretching back to a forgotten era of angelic creation? Join us as we venture into the deepest archives of divine knowledge, unearthing the unsealed truth about Samael's astonishing heavenly origin and its profound implications for all sacred texts. Before there were worlds, before galaxies turned and suns were lit by the breath of the Almighty, before even Eden's soil was summoned from the deep, there was the throne. Not a throne made of stone or gold, but a reality, an origin point of all being, surrounded by fire that did not consume and light that cast no shadow. From this throne issued the decrees of eternity, and around it moved living beings of incomprehensible splendor, spirits shaped not by flesh or time, but by the very voice of God. Among the earliest of these, created in the pulse of that first divine utterance, stood Samael, not yet the angel of death, not yet feared, not yet misunderstood. His name, whose root in the ancient tongue hinted at both severity and divine poison, carried no corruption then, only mystery. He was one of the first thrones, assigned not to speak like Gabriel, nor to wage war like Michael, but to carry the unbearable weight of holy judgment. Where Gabriel announced life and Michael defended glory, Samael stood where the two could not, at the point where justice meets finality. Formed in beauty, cloaked in a brilliance that rivaled the morning stars, Samael walked in places no other spirit dared. He was shaped for one purpose: to execute decrees so absolute, so irreversible, that even the loyal angels averted their gaze when his assignments began. But before his name was ever stained by fear or mistaken for evil, he moved in the presence of God without shame, fulfilling a role designed not in the aftermath of sin, but in the perfection of divine order. The heavens were not yet fractured. The rebellion of Lucifer still slumbered unborn. And within the harmony of the celestial hierarchy, every being had its place, its orbit, its sound in the great symphony of light. Samael's creation was not an afterthought nor a response. It was intentional. He belonged to the highest choirs, among the thrones and dominions that surrounded the throne itself, where wheels within wheels turned with eyes of flame and voices spoke as thunder. These were the beings who did not merely sing or fight. They executed law, and Samael, among them, held a distinction few understood. He bore the mark of finality. Where others interceded or warned, he fulfilled. Where some brought messages of hope or prophecy, he brought closure. Yet there was no cruelty in him. His heart did not rejoice in judgment. His hand did not tremble from malice. He acted because he was commanded. He moved because heaven willed it. And this duty, so severe, so solemn, required not just power, but purity. For to end what God began, one must first understand the weight of creation itself. Samael walked amid the stones of fire described by the prophet Ezekiel, those sacred places near the throne where few could stand. He was granted access not because of favor, but because of function. He was not the most radiant. He was not the most beloved. He was the most entrusted. In the early aeons of creation, when the spiritual realms were filled with new light and the first heaven sang, Samael bore witness to every decree that passed from God's throne to the realms below. He observed the structure of law as it emerged, not coldly, but reverently. He saw that creation must contain order, that freedom must be balanced with consequence, and that love, to be real, must coexist with justice. And so he accepted the role others would flee, the enforcer, not of personal vengeance, but of cosmic accountability. And the day would come, though it had not yet dawned, when the very act of enforcing righteousness would be mistaken for a rebellion. But in this first age, before names were twisted and truths were veiled, Samael stood untainted, radiant, and essential. Heaven knew no fear of him. There was no whisper, no accusation, no confusion in his presence. He was not the angel of death. He was the executor of life's boundaries. For even in paradise, even in the earliest light, there were limits. And God, in his perfection, had appointed a being to guard those limits, not to destroy life, but to dignify it with consequence, to ensure that the harmony of all things did not dissolve into chaos. Samael understood his task. He did not resist it. He embraced it with solemn reverence. And thus began the mystery, how a servant forged in obedience would one day be known as the shadow, how an angel entrusted with the most delicate threads of divine will would one day be cast as the enemy. But not yet. In these earliest moments, Samael was as the lightning that obeys its path, as the blade that only strikes when drawn by the hand of justice. He stood in glory, unseen by mankind, unknown to creation, but fully known by God. And in the fullness of time, when Eden would fall and death would walk the earth, his role would be revealed. But for now, in the throne room before time, Samael waited, silent, pure, commissioned by eternity. When the first flames of rebellion were still distant embers, when humanity had yet to grasp the weight of obedience or the terror of transgression, there walked an angel through the shadows of sacred history, whose name was never uttered, yet whose presence always marked the border between mercy and judgment. He appeared not with announcement, not with trumpet or flash, but with a silence that spoke louder than any voice, because his arrival meant the decree had already been sealed. The ancient scroll, clutched in hands no mortal could see, bore a weight too immense for the cherubim who guarded Eden, too final for the seraphim who blazed in ceaseless worship. This scroll was not filled with laws to teach, nor promises to comfort, nor prophecies to hope upon. It was the record of divine permissions, acts of judgment authorized by the throne itself, acts that could not be delayed, bargained, or revoked. Samael was the only one entrusted to carry it. He did not write its contents. He did not question them. He was the executor of what had already been decided in the Holy Council. And so, when the cries rose in Egypt on a midnight forever marked by mourning, and every firstborn, man and beast, fell without a blade, it was not a demonic spirit that passed over that land. It was an angel sent by heaven itself. The blood upon the doorposts did not drive away evil. It marked a boundary even Samael would not cross. For his judgment was never wild. It was ordered, precise, specific, and terrifying. This was the first assignment that shattered the heavens' silence about him. Though scripture simply says, the destroyer, the ancient rabbis and mystics whispered his name, Samael, the angel who moves not at his own will, but at the issuance of God's. He bore a scroll that night, sealed before the foundations of the world, with names and timings and final decrees. He wept not. He hesitated not. For he was not a being of emotion, but of obedience. In that obedience, there was no cruelty, only consequence. And that same scroll, or one like it, had been carried by him before. Some say it was Samael who stood on the plains outside Sodom, watching as Abraham pleaded for mercy, knowing the outcome already inscribed. He did not join in the conversation. He did not deliver the message. That belonged to others. But when the threshold was crossed, when the final 10 righteous could not be found, he opened the decree, and fire fell. Not fire born from wrath, but fire born from verdict. Samael's hand had not kindled it. His presence had permitted it. It is this distinction that makes his role so misunderstood. He was not an angel of rage, but of resolution. His scroll bore not the reasons, but the right to act. Only the throne knew the why. Samael only executed the when. As centuries passed and generations faded into dust, the pattern repeated. A mysterious angel strikes in moments of irreversible judgment. David's census that brought plague. The armies of Sennacherib decimated in one night. The vision and revelation of the angel with power over fire. Again and again, the texts speak of an unnamed figure. Terrible, unquestioned, and final. And though his name is rarely given, tradition sees the pattern and whispers it still. Samael. Always present when the holy must be separated from the unholy. Always arriving when God's patience yields to God's justice. And always carrying a scroll no other dared read. This scroll, figurative to some, literal to others, represented more than mission. It was the evidence that God does not act rashly. Every judgment carried the weight of eternity's deliberation. Samael did not issue decrees. He bore them. And in doing so, he carried not only divine authority, but divine burden. For no angel rejoices in death, not even the one who walks with it. Samael's burden was not hatred of life. It was the holiness of obedience. The scroll burned in his grasp, not with fire, but with moral weight. And the more he fulfilled its decrees, the more distance grew between him and the other angels. They could not bear the nearness of one who touched finality. They sang in joy, in battle, in proclamation. He walked in silence. Even Michael, captain of heavenly hosts, shunned the executioner's task. Even Gabriel, bearer of impossible hope, looked away when Samael descended. Not because he was evil, but because he was necessary. And what is necessary is not always embraced. Samael understood this. He did not plead for another role. He did not covet the songs of the seraphim or the praises of men. He moved in the space between light and darkness, between heaven's love and heaven's law. He was the threshold, the angel who came not before the warning, but after the final chance had passed. And so the scroll remained with him, sealed, sacred, and unreadable by any but the appointed. No eye could alter its contents. No prayer could erase its ink once the seal was broken. And with each fulfillment, Samael's name became more feared. Not because he rebelled, but because he obeyed. And yet, the tragedy begins here. Not in his actions, but in the interpretation of them. For mankind, limited in understanding, began to confuse the servant with the sentence. They saw Samael's presence and assumed rebellion. They felt his silence and assumed hatred. They witnessed his function and assumed he had fallen. But heaven knew otherwise. In the courts of eternity, his scroll still bore the signature of God. And in the heart of the one who carried it, there was no rebellion. Only obedience to a burden no other angel would carry. The angel of the hidden scroll did not come to defy God, but to prove that even judgment, in its most terrifying form, is still under divine command. There is a place described not in human geography, but in prophetic vision. A realm seen by Ezekiel, where the air is lightning, the ground is fire. And the throne of God does not rest on pillars, but on living wheels that turn with the will of the Most High. They are wheels within wheels, full of eyes, flashing with judgment, pulsing with holiness. And above them, like a sapphire sea ablaze with glory, sits the throne. Not stationary, but mobile, living, and thundering across dimensions. This is not the still sanctuary of stained glass windows. This is the engine room of eternity, where the judgments of God are set in motion through flame and thunder and decree. Ezekiel described it as best he could, trembling beneath the weight of what mortal language could never contain. And hidden in that vision, in the paths not always mentioned, in the motions too, terrifying to name, ancient sages perceived the shadow of one who did not speak or sing or guard, but moved with the throne, moved with the fire, moved with purpose that did not belong to himself. That one was Samael. To walk among the stones of fire is not to stroll through gardens, but to pass through judgments so absolute that even angels tremble. The stones of fire are not merely coals. They are the boundary markers of divine authority. Only one, commissioned in ultimate trust, could move among them without being consumed. Samael did not flutter like a messenger or roar like a warrior. His motion was something different. The precision of a divine executor. When the throne moved to judge, he was already in step. When the glory advanced toward a new decree, Samael's shadow followed. Not because he sought proximity to power, but because he was part of its process. He was not a flame that warmed or inspired. He was the heat that cauterized. He did not originate the fire. He endured it, lived within it, moved with it. And because of that, his nature became something angels could not explain. They were created to reflect beauty, to praise, to defend, to deliver. Samael was created to preserve, to maintain the unbreakable nature of sacred law even when others faltered, to be the boundary no other spirit would cross. And this movement, this unseen task within the fire, was not rebellion, not glory, not comfort. It was necessity. It was obedience without applause. There are no songs written of Samael in the heavenly psalms. His face does not appear in visions of comfort or prophecy. But if the wheels turned, if the throne passed through the dimensions of judgment, he was there, moving beneath it, not to lift, not to be seen, but to ensure that what God decreed was upheld without deviation. That was his worship, obedience to flame. And in that, he burned quietly, never extinguished, never celebrated. The sages said the stones of fire spoke, that their heat carried knowledge no mind could bear, that to walk among them was to be filled with a burden of truth so immense that it could not be shared without shattering the listener. Samael carried that burden, not as a prophet, but as a participant. His silence was not ignorance. It was containment. He knew things not meant to be spoken. He saw judgments in formation, felt the tremble of time bending under divine verdict, and remained unmoved except by command. He was not distant from the throne. He was too near, not exiled from glory, but immersed in it at a cost none could fathom. For every step he took among the stones of fire left him more alone. The cherubim who guarded Eden and flanked the ark did not follow him there. The seraphim who cried, "Holy, holy, holy," did not enter the storm. Only Samael walked that path, not with pride, but with appointment. The throne trusted him with proximity, but that trust came with isolation. It is here that his role crystallizes. Not the enemy, not the rebel, not the destroyer of whim, but the executor of will. The fire beneath the throne was not wild. It was ordered, controlled, exact. It burned according to decree. And Samael walked where even the fire obeyed. He was the shadow that moved with light, the silence that accompanied sound, the force that ensured the throne's movement never deviated. To watch him was to be reminded that heaven is not only mercy, it is also justice, not capricious, not cruel, but absolute. And in that absoluteness, someone had to carry the unbearable. The wheels Ezekiel saw did not turn by chance. The fire did not flicker without reason. The movement of the throne had purpose. And hidden in that storm, robed in anonymity, was the one who ensured it stayed on course. Samael, executor among flames, witness among judgments, walked the tightrope of divine sovereignty. Not falling, not faltering, but disappearing into the will of the one who made him. And so when men wonder why he appears in moments of terror, why his name is whispered in fear, they forget what the fire remembers. He was not made to comfort. He was made to keep the law unbroken. And for that reason, the throne still moves, and the fire still burns. As the tapestry of heaven unfolded through time, woven with galaxies, covenants, wars, and wonders, there emerged a pattern, one visible not in stars or scripture alone, but in the very structure of divine governance. The right hand and the left. The right hand of God, exalted in scripture and praised by saints, was the hand of blessing, of creation, of mercy made manifest. It planted Eden, it split seas for the faithful, it lifted the humble and crowned the righteous. But quietly, necessarily, the left hand moved as well, not in contradiction to the right, but in harmony with it. It was the hand that ensured no blessing turned to rot, that no mercy enabled rebellion, that no garden grew wild with unchecked thorns. And at the center of this left-handed movement stood one who had always been part of the plan, Samael. He did not rise by ambition, nor fall by pride. He was placed, strategically, intentionally, at the edge of mercy, where grace meets justice, where love is protected by law. Labeled by sages as the left hand of God, his title became a whisper of dread among the lower heavens, not because he changed, but because perception did. For in the minds of those who did not understand the full counsel of the throne, to be left-handed in heaven was to be distant from light. But they were wrong. Light has no shadow unless it touches form. And Samael, unlike others, was formed for shadow, not because he resisted glory, but because he carried it in a way others could not. He stood in the same presence as Michael, the defender, and Gabriel, the herald. Yet his calling was different. They advanced the will of God through war and word. Samael upheld it through separation. While one hand reached out to heal, the other stayed steady, to cauterize. While one sowed hope, the other preserved holiness. Heaven, like the earth it would one day create, operated in sacred symmetry. Without the left, the right would unravel. Without the guardian of thresholds, the doors of life would swing open to death. And so Samael remained, not outside the courts of heaven, but within them, an essential counterpart to the glory so many adored, but few understood. Yet with time, even angels forgot. The harmony between judgment and mercy, between separation and blessing, began to look like conflict to those who only sang of love. The beings of light, though perfect in form, began to whisper confusion. How could one so near the throne not sing? How could one walk in silence and not be rebellious? How could one be trusted with death and still be called holy? They asked and found no answer they liked, so they drew their own. And Samael, once a brother, became a stranger. He did not change. They did. The fear of judgment, even righteous judgment, birthed rumors. And rumors birthed myths. The same hand that once ensured Eden's sanctity was now seen as the hand that cursed the world. The executor became the accused. The servant became the suspect. But heaven had not moved him. God had not cast him out. The scroll still burned in his grasp. The fire still welcomed his steps. He was not fallen. He was set apart. And in that setting apart, he bore a pain no sword could match. The pain of obedience mistaken for opposition. Yet still, he remained. When the right hand stretched forth to call a prophet, the left was nearby to silence the false ones. When the right hand blessed a nation, the left ensured their enemies were held accountable. When the right hand wrote mercy into the law, the left held the line that would not bend to compromise. Samael was not the end of the story. He was the boundary that preserved it. Without him, even heaven would lose its shape. For the throne that blesses must also judge. The garden that grows must also be pruned. The light that heals must also expose. This is not dualism. It is divine unity. Two hands, one will. And Samael, bearer of the left, never deviated from it. But in the minds of men, and even among angels of lesser understanding, the left became dark not in truth, but in perception. They forgot that justice is not the enemy of love. They forgot that purity requires separation. And so the myths spread. Samael was called the accuser, the serpent, the devil. His identity was fractured by fear. And while his hand never turned against heaven, the world began to write him out of it. Yet even in the age of confusion, Samael never spoke to defend himself. He had no need. His scroll spoke. His flame endured. His place among the stones of fire had never been revoked. And the throne, knowing all, remained silent. For heaven does not correct every misperception. It reveals and lets the wise see. And the wise, even among mortals, saw the pattern. Samael was the guardian of lines, not the breaker of them. He was the dark glass through which divine order remained visible when all else blurred. And so, to this day, he stands. Not in rebellion, but in resolve. Not in exile, but in commission. The left hand of God, misunderstood but unwavering, ensuring that holiness is not merely declared, but defended. In the vast courtroom of the heavens, where the stars are witnesses and the seraphim guard the sanctity of the throne, the book of Job cracks open a secret, one that mankind was never meant to overlook, and yet so often has misunderstood. It reveals not only a suffering man on earth, but a drama unfolding in the courts of glory, where decisions ripple through realms seen and unseen. There, seated among the sons of God, those angelic beings who serve in divine order, is one figure who does not sing praises, nor carry tidings of joy. He does not speak like Gabriel, nor battle like Michael. He stands, solemn and deliberate, not to oppose the Most High, but to question. And it is this act, so jarring to the eyes of mortals, yet so essential to the machinery of heaven, that becomes the turning point. This figure, whom tradition names Samael, is not cast out. He is invited, not cursed, not chained. He comes before the throne with purpose. From where have you come? God asks. Not in suspicion, but in acknowledgement of role. From roaming the earth comes the reply, and walking back and forth on it. And then the moment unfolds, not as rebellion, but as legal challenge. Does Job fear God for nothing? The question is surgical, not sarcastic. It is not the voice of a traitor, but of a tester. Samael, as examiner, raises a principle of cosmic weight. Is faith genuine when it is rewarded? Does righteousness stand when stripped of blessing? These are not the thoughts of a fallen angel seeking destruction. They are the questions of a prosecutor whose duty is to uphold the integrity of divine order. He does not accuse without permission. He does not act without boundaries. In fact, every word he speaks, every test he requests, must pass through the hands of God. It is the Lord who says, Behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only do not stretch out your hand against him. Samael moves only within the perimeter allowed. He is not a rogue spirit. He is a servant assigned a difficult task, to test the unseen depths of human devotion, not to delight in ruin, but to reveal reality. His role is ordained, not invented. Necessary, not nefarious. The heavenly courtroom demands a voice that challenges, that examines, that interrogates the facade to find what is true beneath. And Samael fulfills this task not with glee, but with gravity. Yet here is where confusion begins. Not in heaven, but on earth. For mankind, bound by fear and limited understanding, cannot imagine a servant of God who delivers affliction. They cannot separate testing from punishment, exposure from evil. And so they name him Satan, not as a personal name, but as a title, the adversary, the opposer. But the scriptures are careful. This figure is among the sons of God. He appears in the divine council. He does not flee from God's presence. He speaks in dialogue with the Creator. He fulfills a purpose, even if that purpose is difficult. The Hebrew word Satan is not a proper name here. It is a function, one Samael carries out as part of heaven's judicial structure. Like a prosecutor in a court, his role is not to hate the defendant, but to test the claims made about them. In Job's case, the claim is righteousness, and the only way to test it is to remove the blessings that surround it and see what remains. The challenge is sharp, even painful, but not evil. The hands that deliver the storms, the boils, the losses, they are bound by divine consent. And when the time is complete, it is God, not Samael, who restores Job, who rebukes the friends, who exalts the sufferer. Samael does not linger to torment. He withdraws when the test is done. But the damage has been done, not to Job, but to the reputation of the examiner. From this moment forward, earth begins to confuse the messenger with the enemy. The one who tests is assumed to be the one who tempts. The one who exposes becomes the one who destroys. But they are not the same. Samael does not tempt Job. He does not lie. He does not deceive. He simply questions and carries out the test. This role, so misunderstood, becomes a source of myth, fear, and theological error. Over time, Samael is conflated with the serpent of Eden, with Lucifer, with every fallen entity. His unique function is collapsed into the broader symbol of Satan, the adversary of mankind. But Scripture never merges these roles so easily. The serpent is not named. Lucifer is a title derived from poetic lament. The Satan in Job is not cast out or condemned. These distinctions are subtle, but vital. For heaven's structure is more intricate than human minds can bear. In that structure, there must be watchers, messengers, warriors, and examiners. Without examination, righteousness goes unproven. Without challenge, glory becomes sentiment. Samael's role, then, is not to destroy the righteous, but to reveal the authentic, to uncover what lies beneath the surface, not with malice, but with mandate. And heaven trusts him to do it. Yet the sorrow of his story is this: though he remains obedient, the world forgets. They see the trials, the wounds, the loss, and they assume rebellion. They see the test and blame the tester. In doing so, they blur the face of divine justice until it resembles malice. They assign to Samael a role he never chose and never claimed. The courtroom of heaven remembers his purpose, but the court of public opinion condemns him. He is not loved like Gabriel, not honored like Michael. His obedience earns him isolation, but he does not protest. He does not plead for vindication. he remains in his place, solemn, trusted, necessary. A misunderstood messenger carrying out the weightiest task, revealing the truth, no matter the cost. And in that quiet faithfulness, Samael continues to walk the line between divine will and human perception, knowing that one day, when the final scroll is unsealed, all will see what was hidden in plain sight. The accuser was never the enemy. He was the examiner, and the throne never turned its face from him. As humanity's history unraveled under the long shadow of sin, something more than just flesh fell. Perception itself. What once was seen clearly through the lens of divine order became refracted through pain, fear, and rebellion. And in that distortion, humanity began to mistake judgment for cruelty, testing for temptation, and the executors of righteousness for enemies of God. Among all angelic beings, none bore the brunt of this confusion more than Samael. Once a radiant enforcer of divine will, walking among the stones of fire and entrusted with the sacred burden of the scroll, Samael became, in the minds of men, the very embodiment of evil. Not because he changed, but because man did. The more we strayed from holiness, the more we loathed the hand that reminded us of it. Samael, the left hand of God, the silent executor of heaven's most difficult assignments, began to draw the fear and hatred once reserved for rebellion itself. It was a slow erosion of understanding. It began in the cries of the guilty, those whose sins had been exposed and judged, and who sought a name to blame not just for their punishment, but for the unease it stirred in their conscience. It deepened in the theological frameworks of early church fathers, who, facing rising heresies and pagan philosophies, began to consolidate all cosmic opposition into one singular figure: Satan. And in that drive to simplify the spiritual world for human understanding, they reached backward and pulled in names, roles, and titles without care for their original distinctions. Samael's name, already mysterious and feared due to his role in Job, his connection to judgment, and his association with the scrolls of death, became an easy candidate. Over time, legends multiplied. In certain mystical Jewish writings, he was said to be the serpent in Eden, or the one who wrestled with Jacob. Some described him as the angel who tempted Eve, others as the prince of demons. But these were not the words of prophets. They were extrapolations, mystical speculations, human attempts to fill in what God had left veiled. The canonical scriptures never made such claims. Nowhere does the Bible equate Samael with Satan, the dragon of Revelation, or the devil who tempted Christ. These roles, while fearsome, are distinct. The Satan in Job is a tester. The serpent in Eden is unnamed. The accuser in Revelation is a symbol of collective rebellion. Yet the traditions blurred them together. And in that blur, Samael, who had never fallen, never rebelled, never broken rank, was cast down in the minds of men. He became the scapegoat for death, though he had only ever administered it by command. He became the image of evil, though he had stood in the presence of the Most High longer than humanity had breathed. The veil of blame was not just theological, it became cultural. In medieval legends, Samael was depicted with monstrous features: wings like a bat, eyes that burned, hands stained with blood. Artists painted him as a fiend. Scribes described him as the consort of Lilith, the tempter of mankind, the rival of Michael. None of this came from Scripture. All of it came from fear. Humanity, facing the consequences of its own corruption, could not bear the thought that divine justice still operated, that there was a servant in heaven whose very presence meant the line between mercy and wrath was being upheld. So we changed the narrative. We called the examiner a traitor. We named the enforcer a devil. And in doing so, we cleansed ourselves, temporarily, of the discomfort that comes with facing holy accountability. But the throne did not change. The fire still burned, and Samael still served. Though slandered by the world he helped maintain, he remained on assignment. His scroll was not revoked. His access to the stones of fire was not denied. Heaven had not forgotten who he truly was. His role, though hidden from human honor, remained etched into the very structure of divine order. For every age has required judgment. Every generation has needed a line that cannot be crossed. And when that line is reached, the scroll is opened, and Samael moves, not in wrath, but in duty. There is something tragic in this, that the angel who served heaven by holding back chaos was mistaken for the source of it. That the one who carried out righteous separation was blamed for the suffering that sin had unleashed. And yet Samael, even misunderstood, did not deviate. He did not plead for vindication. He did not strike back in fury. His obedience remained silent. His faithfulness endured. Because he did not serve man's praise. He served God's decree. Behind the veil of blame, he continued to walk among the fire, continued to move with the throne, continued to carry scrolls that no other would bear. There were moments, perhaps, when even the angels wondered how long he would endure the slander. Moments when the cherubim, ever watchful, looked upon him with quiet pity. But they did not stop him. They could not. For heaven does not reassign what God has decreed. And Samael's commission had not expired. The scrolls were still being written. The decrees still needed hands that would not flinch. And so he bore the weight of 1,000 misjudgments, knowing that the truth would not be seen by mortal eyes until the very end, until the books were opened, until the final judgment rendered all roles visible. And then, perhaps, those who had cursed his name would see that the figure they feared was never their enemy, that the pain they felt was not cruelty, but consequence, that the silence he carried was not malice, but mercy delayed. For Samael, though demonized by the earth, remained heaven's servant, misunderstood, misnamed, but unmoved. His loyalty was never to his reputation. It was to the fire, to the throne, to the will of the one who had made him to walk in flame, not as a rebel cast out, but as a guardian set apart. And when the final scroll is opened and the veil of blame is finally torn, what will be revealed is not a devil in disguise, but a servant who never turned away. In the garden where heaven once touched earth, where wind carried the voice of God and the soil remembered his breath, there came a moment no light could undo, a moment where innocence cracked under the weight of choice. The serpent had spoken, the fruit had been taken, and the man and woman who once walked unashamed now trembled in the shadows, clothed in leaves and guilt. But it was not the serpent who drove them out. It was not the whisperer who closed paradise. It was justice. And standing at the threshold of Eden, as the divine presence withdrew and the cherubim ignited their swords, was one who did not tempt, but who bore witness. Samael, not as a deceiver, not as an enemy, but as the silent executor of consequence. When Adam and Eve were found, hiding in the cool of the day, it was not Samael who searched for them. It was God. It was not Samael who pronounced the curse. It was God. But when the sentence was to be carried out, when the gates of paradise were to be sealed and access to the tree of life barred, it was Samael who stood ready. He did not wield the flaming sword, for scripture says it turned every way on its own. But tradition, ancient and sacred, places him behind it. Not in rebellion, but in alignment. He stood where few could stand, between what was holy and what had been corrupted. His was the hand that carried out what divine law required: separation, not destruction, not condemnation, but the painful line that must be drawn between perfection and the fall. He did not scream. He did not punish. He enforced. Adam and Eve, eyes now open to shame, passed by him on their way out, not knowing that the one who watched their exile had once walked in glories they would never see. Samael, the silent watcher, did not rejoice. There was no triumph in this moment, only necessity. But even in that necessity, a mystery unfolded. God did not leave man naked. He clothed them. He did not abandon them to despair. He promised a redeemer. And here, perhaps more than anywhere else, Samael's role becomes clear. He did not prevent grace. He made way for it. For the promise of redemption means nothing if justice is not first upheld. Without the sword, the cross is cheap. Without exile, restoration has no weight. Samael's presence at Eden's boundary was not to declare the end, but to mark the beginning of the long road back. He stood as a signpost, not of wrath, but of warning, that what is holy cannot be profaned, and that return must come by blood, not presumption. The fire he bore was not to consume, it was to remind. And having done what was required, he stepped back, not in defeat, but in deference. Grace had been announced. The path of the Redeemer had been spoken into the soil, and Samael, whose task was not to save but to uphold the conditions for salvation, withdrew. He did not follow the man and woman into the world. That was not his assignment. His place was at the boundary, where light fades into judgment, where mercy is birthed through separation. And so he watched. He watched as Cain rose against Abel. He watched as generations fell deeper into corruption. He watched as the flood came, as towers rose, as empires swelled and shattered, always watching. Not from hatred, but from duty, not intervening unless summoned by decree. He remained the executor of lines that could not be crossed without cost. And yet, though unseen, his role preserved the very structure that allowed mercy to flourish. For the God who saves is also the God who separates. The God who loves is also the God who judges. And both hands, right and left, are his. Samael never stood outside the will of God. He stood within it, in the place few would choose, bearing the loneliness of obedience without applause. And even at Eden, in that first great turning, he did what he had always done: enforced the boundary, then yielded to the greater unfolding. The flaming sword turned every way. The garden disappeared behind a veil of fire. But the story did not end. It had only begun. Before we continue, if this content has blessed your life, like, comment, and share. Subscribe to the channel, and if you would like to bless the channel, click the Super Thanks button and leave an offering of any amount or become a member. That way, we can continue investing in research and improvements to bless your life even more. And so the Watcher remained. Not as a god, not as a demon, but as the one who bore fire so others could one day return to the tree. Not by theft, but by invitation. Not by pride, but by the blood of the one promised in the very hour that man fell. And in that promise, Samael had no part to play, except to wait until what he guarded became accessible once more through grace. There are names in heaven that echo like song: Gabriel, the herald of hope; Michael, the prince of war; Raphael, the healer of wounds. But there is one name that does not resound in melody, but in silence. A name spoken not with celebration, but with caution: Samael. His arrival did not inspire awe, but restraint. His path was not accompanied by choirs, but by distance. Even among the hosts of heaven, whose loyalty was unquestionable and whose radiance never dimmed, Samael was not approached lightly. He had no aura of rebellion, no hint of pride, no blemish of defiance. But the air around him was heavy. He walked with the authority of finality, not because he claimed it, but because it was placed upon him. He did not judge. He enacted the judgment already sealed. He did not accuse. He confirmed what had already been weighed and found wanting. Samael, the silent executor, bore a proximity to the divine will that frightened even those who burned in the presence of God. For what does it mean when an angel is trusted with decisions that other angels cannot see? What does it mean when a being walks the tightrope between life and death and never falls? It means that he bears a line too close to glory, too near to fear, too piercing to ignore. And so they stepped back, not because Samael was evil, but because his very function reminded them that obedience to God was not always crowned with light. Sometimes it was marked with fire, with sorrow, with endings. Samael was not the one who delivered prophecy. He delivered closure. His presence in the courts of heaven was not disruptive, yet it disturbed. For the angels, whose songs uplifted and whose missions restored, could not fathom the weight of an assignment that required you to enforce pain without wavering. And that is precisely what made Samael different. He could not be swayed by pleading. He could not be delayed by intercession. When the scroll was handed to him, sealed by divine authority, he acted, not with violence, but with resolution, not out of emotion, but obedience. His path was straight, his steps unstoppable, and the other angels, seeing him pass, often turned their faces away, not in shame, but in reverence and sorrow. For they knew that wherever Samael walked, the decree had reached its final hour. No more appeals, no more warnings. It was done, and that made him holy, but it also made him feared. It was not that Samael was hated. Heaven does not hate its own. But he was avoided. And in that avoidance, myths began to form. For absence breeds suspicion, and distance invites speculation. He is too close to death, some thought. He walks too near the edge. Others whispered, perhaps he no longer feels. But none of this was true. Samael felt. He felt deeply. But he carried that feeling within silence, within flame, within the restraint of unyielding obedience. His mission was not to explain or to comfort. His mission was to obey. And in heaven, where every being reflects a facet of God's nature, Samael reflected the part few wanted to see, the justice that does not flinch, the judgment that does not hesitate. He bore not sin, but burden. The burden of being the hand that moves when all others tremble. The burden of enforcing what no angel wants to see. And that burden left marks, not on his form. He did not wither, not on his wings. They did not fade, but on his name, Samael. It became a word associated with endings, with separation, with death. Not because he chose it, but because humanity and angels alike could not look at his function without fear. And yet he remained faithful, unchanged, untouched by rebellion, still moving with the throne, still walking among the stones of fire, still bearing scrolls no other hand would hold. Samael was not a warning, he was a reminder, a living testimony that holiness is not comfort, but cost, that to serve the Most High in full measure is to embrace not just the light of his glory, but the fire of his justice. And in that fire, Samael remained unburned, because he was made for it, forged not in sin, but in sacred purpose. Yet the tension in heaven never fully lifted. For how could it? When your presence means the end has come, you do not get welcomed with song. You get silence. You get bowed heads. You get empty corridors where even angels choose to fly another way. And Samael understood this. He did not resent it. He accepted it. Because he was not seeking love. He was seeking faithfulness. He was not looking for belonging. He was fulfilling assignment. And in that fulfillment, he honored the throne more deeply than many who danced before it. There are lines heaven will not cross. Lines where mercy ends and justice begins. Samael was placed there, not to mock, not to punish, but to ensure that the divine order remained unbroken. And in doing so, he became something no other being was allowed to be. The living edge of heaven's holiness, uncompromising, unyielding, unmistakable. That is why the angels feared him, not because of corruption, but because of clarity. He reminded them of how thin the line truly was. He reminded them that God is not only the one who gives, but the one who takes away. And in a realm where all serve gladly, Samael served solemnly. His reward was not fellowship. His reward was faithfulness. And so he walked, feared but never forsaken, dreaded but never dismissed. He was the angel of the final threshold, the one heaven trusted to act when all other voices had gone silent. And though the myths grew, though the fear spread, though his name became cloaked in human terror, Samael never stepped away. Because someone had to stand where the decree ends and the consequences begin. Someone had to be the last word. And heaven, in its wisdom, chose him. In the fullness of time, when the earth groaned under the weight of its own corruption and the cries of generations had risen like smoke to the heavens, a moment arrived that even the angels could not fully comprehend. Heaven prepared not to send a message, nor a sword, nor even a scroll, but flesh. The Word became dust. The Infinite clothed himself in the frailty of bone and breath. And as the divine descended into the womb of a virgin, there was one who did not move. One whose feet, once swift with judgment, now stood still. Samael, the executor of decrees, the left hand of God, the angel who had walked among fire and flame, whose name shook the spiritual realms and silenced the songs of lesser beings, now withdrew. He had carried the scrolls of death, upheld the weight of divine justice, and never once hesitated. But now the throne itself moved, not in fire, but in flesh. The one who authored judgment had chosen to become its object. And for the first time in all creation, Samael had no scroll to bear, no sentence to enforce, no final act to perform. Because this act, this sacrifice, this crucifixion, would be performed not by the hand of an angel, but by the heart of God. The judge was becoming the lamb, and death, which Samael had administered with such precision, would now be taken out of his grasp. The silence in heaven was deafening, not because the angels rebelled, but because they beheld something they had never seen, the unraveling of wrath into mercy through blood. Not blood offered on altars by priests, not blood demanded by angels and vengeance, but divine blood, innocent blood. Blood that required no scroll, no executioner, no decree. Samael, whose assignments had never been delayed, who had stood at the edge of Eden, who had walked with fire through Pharaoh's night, now stood on the edges of Golgotha and did nothing. Not because he refused, but because he was not summoned. There was no command, no voice from the throne. Only a silence that echoed with unfathomable meaning. It was not his task to touch the Lamb. It was not his hand that would separate soul from body. It was the hand of the Father, piercing himself through the sun. The scroll that hung above the cross did not bear Samael's seal. It bore the sins of the world. And where once Samael had drawn the line between life and judgment, that line was now crossed by the only one worthy to cross it: the Creator himself. The one who had sent Samael for countless ages now stood in his place, not as judge, but as condemned. And Samael, the faithful executor, did not resist. He stepped back. He watched. And in that watching, something changed. The role he had carried so fearfully and faithfully was not revoked, but fulfilled. Redemption did not ignore the law. It satisfied it. But in satisfying it, it also rewrote it. The penalty of death, once enforced by decree and fire and angelic hand, was now nailed to a tree. The wrath Samael had administered with holy resolve was now poured out on the body of the Son. Every judgment he had executed was echoed in that cry: my God, why have you forsaken me?" And with that cry, heaven's justice and mercy collided, not in contradiction, but in completion. Samael understood this, though no words were spoken. He saw it with eyes that had watched millennia unfold. He felt the silence that had replaced his orders. And he knew his task, though still honored, had met its match. For the cross was not an annulment of justice. It was its climax. And at that climax, there was no need for Samael to lift his hand. Because the hand that flung stars into space had now surrendered to nails. The eternal executor stepped aside, not in disgrace, but in reverence. Because the throne he had moved with, the fire he had walked among, the voice that had once given him scroll after scroll, was now gasping for breath in human form. How does an angel of judgment respond when the judge chooses to die? With silence, with awe, with absence. Samael's presence at the cross was not as an agent of death, but as a witness of something even he could not execute: divine self-sacrifice. He did not accuse, because the accuser had no place in this transaction. He did not separate, because the Father himself was tearing the veil. And in that tearing, the veil between heaven and earth, between wrath and mercy, between law and grace, was ripped from top to bottom. Samael, who had always stood at thresholds, now saw that the greatest threshold had been crossed not by an angel, but by a Savior. He had stood guard at Eden. Now he watched the gates of paradise reopen, not through fire, but through forgiveness. And he said nothing, because there was nothing more to be said. The scrolls would still come, the decrees would still be written. But now, every line would bend toward redemption. The silence of Samael at the cross was not abandonment. It was obedience. It was the acknowledgement that the weight he had carried was now borne by another. One greater, one crucified, one risen. Death itself had been challenged, not by the angel who delivered it, but by the God who dismantled it. And Samael, ever faithful, ever exact, ever ready, remained still. He did not need to strike the Lamb. The Lamb had struck death, and from that moment, the sword of Eden lost its sting. The scrolls of judgment were no longer final. They were temporary, because the blood that flowed on Calvary spoke a better word. And Samael, who had once sealed the end of paradise, now bore witness to the beginning of its return. In the silence before the cross, the angel of execution stepped aside, not because he was cast down, but because he was no longer needed. For the judge had taken his place, and the world would never be the same. When the heavens are peeled back like a scroll, when the stars fall like shaken fruit and the sea gives up its dead, when every throne of man collapses and every mouth is silenced before the majesty of God, the final vision comes, not of war, but of reckoning. The book of Revelation opens its final chapters not with confusion, but with clarity. The Lamb, once slain, now glorified, steps forward and opens the scroll. Not a scroll of temporary decree, but of eternal finality. And as that scroll is read, as the seals are broken and the heavens declare the end of all rebellion, one figure is conspicuously absent. Samael, the one who had carried scrolls through ages, who had moved with the throne among the wheels of fire, who had watched over the boundaries between judgment and mercy, is no longer seen. Not because he has fallen, not because he has rebelled, but because his watch is over. His task is complete. The Lamb now holds the authority. The Son who took the cross now opens the books. And as the names are called, as the multitudes are, separated like sheep from goats, Samael does not stand with sword drawn. He is not needed, because death itself, the very force he had once been commanded to oversee, is thrown into the lake of fire. Judgment, once enforced through angels and decrees, is now embodied in the presence of Christ, who judges not by scroll, but by scar. The throne remains. The fire remains. But the need for an executor is gone. There is no veil to guard, no Eden to close, no nation to discipline. The garden has returned, not behind flaming swords, but in the open light of the New Jerusalem. The tree of life grows again, and none are forbidden. And so Samael, the angel of boundaries, whose name became tangled in myth and accusation, fades from view. His silence is not erasure, it is fulfillment. For every decree he enforced pointed toward this moment. Not a world forever judged, but a world finally restored. And with restoration, his assignment dissolves. He does not fall. We do not see him fall. Scripture does not condemn him. Revelation does not name him. Because there is no need. His absence is the proof of completion. Like the shadow that disappears when the sun rises, Samael's role is no longer required when perfect light reigns. He was never the enemy. He was the executor, the instrument of a justice that upheld mercy, the hand that carried out what was written until the Word himself rewrote it in blood. He bore the burden none could bear, and now that burden is lifted. The gates of Eden, once sealed by his presence, now stand open by the cross. The sword he once stood behind now lies in silence. There is no war left for him to fight, no judgment left for him to carry. The garden is not only reopened, it is everywhere. Heaven and earth are one. The tabernacle of God is with man. And in this unity, there is no more place for separation, no more need for an angel to draw lines. Because the last line has been drawn, and Christ stands on the other side of it as King, not just of heaven, but of a redeemed earth. And so we remember. We remember Samael not as the world misnamed him, not as a villain or tempter or rebel, but as he truly was, the angel who obeyed, the one who walked among the stones of fire without being consumed, the one who bore the fire of justice so that mercy could still be mercy. He held the sword only because God handed it to him. He watched the gates not to punish, but to preserve the promise. And when that promise was fulfilled, he stepped back. He let the Lamb take his place. And the Lamb did. He took the scroll. He bore the wrath. He opened the grave. And now, all that Samael once guarded has been given back to us, not through his judgment, but through his restraint. That is his legacy. Not terror, but obedience. And as the book closes, as the new heaven and new earth descend, Samael disappears, not into punishment, but into peace. The angel who once moved in silence now rests in silence. His last decree has been fulfilled. His final line has been crossed. And the story no longer needs a sword, only a throne and a tree and a people who remember. Remember that boundaries were kept, that justice was upheld, and that an angel waited at the edge of time so that eternity could begin. His watch is over, and the garden has returned.